Anderson was a beginning of education for me in a way because I more or less went to school prior to Anderson because I had to. But the nurturing and a chance to really grow started late in high school. It started in Anderson. I had a fairly good relationship with teachers. Coming from Montopolis, it was more or less going from one neighborhood to another, more or less. It was in one sense, it was coming from one city going to another. The relationship with various instructors. I know one particular instructor that I had, Mr. Mose, who worked with industrial arts. I think did leathercraft, and he admired what I did and gave me an interest in working. It was I think it was close to art that I incorporated the leather crafts because I would do designs on the leather. He was my older brothers, one of my older brothers, homeroom teacher as well, and he would remember that particular brother, and he was very congenial and helped me in a lot of decisions. I remember at one time it was a tie-in from high school to college because he went to Prairie View, I believe, and asked if I would transfer after they had the TSU riots. And I had started Texas Southern and just continued on. But tying him in with Anderson, I remember knowing that my brother's name was John also. His name was John Scott, and I always wanted to be just like Big Fella. So my name was in high school was John Scott. I decided John Scott, and that's in retrospect how he connected the two, because I had a John Scott, and then he started our faces were similar because he was much shorter than I was, but he tied it in with that. But he, along with many of the other instructors, was my beginning for education. Miss Frazier was my homeroom teacher in 12th grade. And of course, Miss Frazier left memories. She demanded the very best, and you knew it. My grades grew tremendously until I got a chance to go into, I had the trustee award. As I remember, Roland Fisher and I think, if I can remember, was only two guys, and our grades were pretty high. But they grew tremendously during that year because Miss Frazier would give you that, should give you inspiration to work upon your aspirations. At times, coming from Montopolis, I would miss the bus. Not really, morning is not my best time, and I would miss the bus. And I remember on occasions, we would have to lead the devotion. We'd have to, and it was my time. Well, I missed the bus on one of the times that I was supposed to lead it, and I ran to school. I would do it on occasions. I ran to school and got there in time enough to do it, but I was breathing hard and heavy, and Oh, she got on me because she said, you're coughing and leaving germs in my room and da, 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 da. But all in all, Miss Frazier was a dynamic instructor. I recognized that later. Yes. I would explain Elsie Anderson as the most dynamic high school in the world. As previously described, I stated that it was a starting point for education for me. I remember after I had started working in education, just how it worked at Anderson. The principal had Boeing 747. All he had to do is to press the button. All of the instructors were very good and they knew exactly what they did. When you went to those particular instructors, you got a world of information, guidance, and it was a chance for you to succeed. I remember going to Texas Southern in college and got in math. I remember doing sine, cosine, and it was in math. I learned a shorter version at Anderson. But prior to that, in math, I got on a deficiency list and I was doing very poorly. And I remember the things that I had come across. And the instructor gave the final exam, and she said, you can't use the shorter version, you have to use the longer version. And I said, well, okay. But based on the principles that I had gotten prior, I knew how to work and work the problem. She said, well, good. And then she got through. She said, you have a B. And she says, oh, no, you did the other part. And I turned it off on the other side. She said, oh, Mr. Scott, you have an A. But with looking back, I saw instructors who, Ms. Taylor had a doctor's degree. I remember her standing and explaining her lessons right at the corner of her desk without a book. And whenever there was a question, she could tell you to go to whatever page, and in most cases to whatever paragraph, and would explain. I remember questioning many of the people that I went to school with in universities. They hadn't had a chance to have social studies, and we had social studies. It was quite uplifting. Again, in retrospect, I would say that whatever you wanted to do, you could start there and work on your desired goals, short term as well as long term. The most memorable moment that stuck out in my mind was when we were all getting ready to go to see at a parade to see John F. Kennedy, and he had gotten assassinated. That was my most memorable moment. I never shall forget it. We loved him. We loved what he had set forth to do, but in politics, basically. I went to Texas Southern, and I have to go back to my inspiration for Texas Southern. One of the students that I really did admire a lot was Esther Sellers. We were like a brother and sister. I remember she stating that she was going to go to Texas Southern, and I said, well, let me see. And I started thinking, originally I wanted to go into biology because I heard a presentation from Dr. Delco. And to this day I remember that he studied fish. That was what I was going to do. I definitely was going to go. And I got acquainted with Miss Adams. And Miss Adams was very close to me, and the Links organization. And I wanted art. Unfortunately, at Anderson, we couldn't have art classes. We didn't have art. So I did as with in industrial arts. I would, I guess, custom tailor the class to fulfill my drawing or whatever painting needs. But a lot of times I would be asked to do an illustration for this or for that. I would do posters and such, and talking with Miss Adams inspired me so much. And Miss Adams says, well, I know John T. Biggers, and John T. Biggers is dynamic in art. Oh, John T. Biggers. And I think that she was an AKA, if I'm not mistaken. I know Dr. Biggers was an alpha, and her husband was an alpha. That might have been one of the connections, but then she knew him, and they gave me a scholarship. The Links organization, all my faults were faultless. And all that they did for me, along with Miss Adams, I felt that I found a need to work harder, and that was my inspiration. And I went into art and enjoyed it, and I would come back to many of, sometimes they would have programs, and I would speak at the Links programs, but that was my inspiration for art and going into art from Anderson, and Anderson's inspiration through Miss Hazel Adams. In schools, we're working with, it's almost mixing chickens with giraffes in one aspect, because along came integration. And it has its good and it has its bad. We were told point blank about competition. And I think in most black schools at that time, the suit followed. Many of the instructors knew our parents, and they didn't really have to go too far with explaining what have you. But now, in testing, for example, so much stress is put on the tests, and the teachers don't really have a chance to give their expertise in tests or in education. Getting a student to do is more or less, it's a job. In many cases, it's when I got into Anderson, I felt like I had a chance to learn rather than I learned or did in classes because I had to. There was Miss Harvey, and she was that instructor in social studies. She was, my God, she was a beautiful lady, and her personality bubbled, and she was the epitome of beauty. At that time, I got so inspired in that class until I did a drawing of her on the desk. But I learned because, as I stated, I had a chance. And the teachers were concerned with the students. I think that there was a love of teaching. There was less stress that I could see politically. Teachers were taught, teachers that taught the students were considered next to the parent or along with the parent, the inspiration. At that time, we were always taught that America was the strongest country in the world, and we knew it. It's a different aspect in many cases now. The teachers were strong. We had I feel the strongest teachers that one could have come across. But the teachers had a chance also to teach rather than they were forced to teach. I feel after going into teaching, it was going into teaching, many times there was a sense of you had to use vigilance rather than your talents in teaching to cover this or to cover that. And there were many times that I wanted to interject things that might have gotten the students to understand a little bit more. But in teaching, and my teaching field was art, it was stressful that I had to incorporate in each class I would other subjects. I found that the freedom of teaching for the learning is that value needs to be brought back. The test, many times kids might understand tests and understand taking tests or what have you, but somehow the knowledge is not gotten by the students, which is quite stressful. Anderson was a cornerstone in many cases for the Black community. It was, everybody knew Miss Frazier. Everybody knew about Anderson's abilities in sports and what have you. I knew before I got to Anderson, and I knew about, we would call it, I guess it was in Kealing and Anderson, initiation. And I think we wouldn't, I don't think it was called initiation, I think it was called Nishayan. Nishayan, in which they would cut. I never got A's cut in my head, but I heard about them. It wasn't, I don't think it was quite as prevalent when I got into school, but my older brothers did. My other brother, John, I think they cut his hair. He was very particular about his dress and what have you. I think he caught each guy that cut his hair and beat him up separately. But Anderson set out on a mountain of its own. We didn't feel that we were deprived. We were extremely rich in education. As I remember, there was a Plan 1 and a Plan 2. A Plan 1, and I checked with many of the students that I went to college with. So, well, this Plan 1, what is that? Well, we couldn't make these if you planned to go to college. You made an A, B, C, or F. And it was an eye-opener. I remember going to one of the instructor's classes. It was Pickard, I think it was in science. He was in chemistry. He had the elements on the wall. Like all instructors, they would have the elements on the wall. But when you did tests, he took the elements. He covered them or he took them down. You look at it, you had to remember them. And to this day, I can remember that aluminum is Al, a positive 3, atomic weight 27, atomic number was 13. I remember on one occasion getting ready to go to a football game. I was ready to go to the football. He was selling tickets. He said, well, John, do you have, did you do the lesson today? I said, well, no, I'm going to do it. I have my books. My books are here. I'm going to do it. He said, no, you don't need to go to the game. You don't have enough sense to go to the game. You got to go do your homework. And I had to do my homework on the curb and explain to him before I went into the game. That was a commitment. I remember his technique, his eye-opening technique. One, I thought this man knew everything. And this is the quality of the teacher. He told me, he told the class, he said, go over there and see what you see outside that window. Well, no, let me start over. He gave us a national standardized test, and we all flunked. He came in and he said, oh, I see you didn't do good on this. Oh, he said, we were talking, people, oh, he's going to stop. That's foolishness. We're not going to do that test. We can't do that. No way. Oh, don't worry about it. He's going to cut down. He came in and said, oh, I see. Everybody failed. Nobody passed. He said, He said, we were all confident. He was like, oh, well, look outside that window over there. See what you see. We went, oh, we don't see nothing. We don't see nothing. Oh, say, yes, something over there. He said, ain't nothing over there but some people digging in them ditches. He said, that's what you're going to be doing if you don't pass this test. He said, and if you don't pass this test, you're not going to pass. And our eyes open up. He said, that's what I like to see. I like to see the white of your eyes. Now I know I got your interest. He said, but I'm not changing. He didn't change. And tying this in with knowing that if I hadn't gotten at least a C, I was going to make an F. That was inspiration. Using simple things. But it was very effective. It was close to understanding, and it was, the instructors were great. They made this go. I can't give them enough, because in teaching, many times I would look back and see just what would happen, many times I would go back to find methods of reaching the students. And it was thinking back, we had a competition with students internationally. The contest was in Japan. And there were students from Russia, Australia, various places. And my student that I entered his work got first award. He got #1, a gold. I was very proud of him, and one of the students, that particular student, later on I was teaching a class after he got that award. His head got a little big, and we were drawing a turkey in which I've used science with animals. I used math with balance and doing basic shapes and the whole 9 yards. We discussed things and they started drawing. I said, well, you have a basic line that you've missed. And the student picked his work up and looked at it. He said, there's no basic line missing. And I thought about that science class and looking out the window. And I told the student, I said, well, okay, you do the drawing and I'll do the grading. And he found that line. working under, I did go and got my master's, but it was just closer to me at Texas Southern. I suppose, I don't know, it was just the family. The family. I went to New Mexico, and you were not a minority, you were quite a strong minority, and all of the students that were black, were students from outside. But working with Dr. Biggers, it was meeting that person who, like that science class, that person knew everything, it seemed. And this was a connection with Miss Adams. It was almost like being at home. You didn't meet Dr. Biggers, you've known him for centuries. He was that type of person. He was very warm. He didn't have a lot of, he didn't use a lot of words. And he was not hyperbolic. He said what he meant, and he meant what he said. He did it in a very simple way. In expressing it, many times he would say, we is, or whatever. And if anyone, everybody knew he knew. Everybody knew he was very heavy. But he would explain things in very simple terms. And I find that thinking about the integration that I brought in before. And it's good and it's bad. Many times when it's, there are certain rules that are so kept. Many times they are genuine, sometimes they're not so. But I felt that going to the black schools and the blackdom gave me a growth, as opposed to when I went to, and I was working on my master's, if I said, I was asked, why do you speak uneducatedly? I said, that's cool. Why do you speak slang? Why are you speaking street vernacular? And if I said, hell, are you an angry black? I had to justify everything. It's analogous to Obama. I had a lot of friends who were not black that asked me, could you explain something about Obama to me? And I would say, well, I would explain to them that with Obama, I knew things, these things were known similar to Dr. Biggers. Struggles and joys and pains that I'm sure he had to go through. But I would bring it back to, why do I need to explain something about Obama to you? And they said, well, we don't know anything about him. And I said, I didn't know anything about the other presidents. When their name popped up, I voted for the least of the evils. You see, I never voted for a president. And they said, oh, you never voted during the president elections? I said, well, I voted, but I voted for the least of the evils. All of them were white men. And I find it strange that you need to know something about him, that he has to be so different. And then I would struggle with how do I describe myself as an American? Is he not an American?